sure everyone has a chance to enter the room. And it looks like we still have a few in the waiting room, so I'm going to wait a little bit longer. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Hearing Officer Nicole Kinsey with the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. This is January 18th, 2022, and this is a status conference for the pending petition for assignment of state filed application 5634 and the associated water right application 5634X of Nevada Irrigation District, and the pending requests for release from priority of state filed applications 5633 and 5634 in favor of water right license 11120 of South Sutter Water District. This status conference is being held in accordance with the notice of status conference dated September 10th, 2021. This status conference is being conducted by Zoom web conference and is also being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. Both the audio and video are being recorded, and we will post files of this recording along with the Zoom generated transcript to the AHO FTP site. The YouTube recording will also be available on the AHO YouTube webpage. If at any time you are experiencing technical difficulties today trying to communicate with us, please send an email to the AHO at admin.hrgoffice@waterboards.ca.gov. AHO staff are monitoring that email inbox, and they can let me know that you are having difficulties with the Zoom platform. Assisting me today are several staff of the Administrative Hearings Office. We have Nicole Mullen, Amy Blunk, Skyler Anderson, and Kyle Wooldridge. I'd like to go ahead and move to appearances. I think we're going to be pretty quick today. The appearances might be the longest part of our day, but it's important. So to do that, I will identify each of the entities who had previously filed an NOI in this proceeding. And if you are representing that entity today, please unmute your microphone and state your name. But as we proceed, just as a reminder, please keep your microphone muted except when you're speaking so we can reduce background noise with the large number of participants we have today. So I'll go ahead and get started with Nevada Irrigation District.
Good morning, this is Andrew McClure of the Manassian office for Nevada Irrigation District.
Good morning, Mr. McClure. South Sutter Water District.
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. Kevin O'Brien of Downey Brand for South Sutter Water District. Also appearing with me is my colleague Austin Cho, and I'll ask Mr. Cho to introduce himself.
Thank you, Kevin. Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. Austin Cho on behalf of South Sutter Water District.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Cho. Contra Costa Water District.
Good morning, Morgan Biggerstaff, appearing on behalf of Contra Costa Water District.
Good morning, Mr. Biggerstaff. Camp Far West Irrigation District.
Good morning, Kelly Tabor from Selmac Simmons and Dunn on behalf of Camp Far West Irrigation District. And I believe Nick Bonsignor from Wagner and Bonsignor may also, he was here. I don't know if he is still here.
Mr. Bonsignor, are you with us, and would you like to introduce yourself? I don't think I see him in our,
dropped off.
He may have dropped off, but he may return. So thank you, and thank you, Ms. Tabor. Yuba County Water Agency.
Good morning, Holly Jacobson, Barkowitz Chronic Shanahan on behalf of Yuba County Water Agency.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Jacobson. State Water Contractors. Placer County Water Agency.
Good morning, Dan Kelly, Placer County Water Agency.
Good morning, Mr. Kelly. U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Good morning, Nancy Murray on behalf of California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Murray. California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance.
Good morning, Chris Schutz, on behalf of California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Schutz. Trout Unlimited.
Good morning, Ms. Kenzie. I'm Tracy Sheehan with Foothills Water Network, and I'm standing in for Trout Unlimited today.
Thank you, Ms. Sheehan. And Ms. Sheehan, since we have you on, are there other entities who you are representing today? Maybe you can list those off for me and we can move through this more quickly. I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Kenzie. Today, I'm standing in for Frank Ranella with Gold Country Fly Fishers, Mark Rockwell with the Northern California Federation of Fly Fishers International, also Trout Unlimited, Dan Buckley of Tributary Whitewater, and also Dave Steindorf of American Whitewater.
Thank you. Just give me a moment while I. And then are you appearing also on behalf of the Foothills Water Network? You may have mentioned that.
Yes, I am.
Yes. Okay.
I omitted one, and I think they're having trouble getting onto the Zoom, but just in case, I would be also representing SARCIS, Save Auburn Ravine, and PARC, PARC, Protect American River Canyons. It appears they're having trouble getting onto the Zoom.
All right. Well, thank you for that note, and we will return at the end. We have quite a few to go through, and we'll just make sure we get everyone introduced who is appearing today. So thank you, Ms. Sheehan. I appreciate it. And remind me if I may repeat. I tried to capture some of these, but I have a long list. So remind me if some of these come up. I will turn now to Friends of the River.
Good morning. This is Ashley Oberhaus appearing on behalf of Friends of the River. My colleague, Mr. Ronald Stork, is here as well.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Overhouse, and good morning, Mr. Stork. Sierra Club.
Good morning, Sean Worth, Conservation Chair for the Untitled Chapter of the Sierra Club.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Worth. Nevada City Rancheria Tribal Council. American Rivers.
My apologies, Ms. Kenzie, Tracy Sheehan, Hills Water Network. I can represent American Rivers as well.
Thank you. And you may have said that and I just missed it, so thank you. South Yuba River Citizen League.
Good morning, Ms. Kenzie, Melinda Booth representing Circle, the South Yuba River Citizens League, joined by my colleague Keiko Mertz as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Booth, and thank you, Ms. Mertz. American River Watershed Institute.
Donald Mooney, representing.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mooney. This may be one of yours, Ms. Sheehan. I may have missed it. Protect American River Canyons.
Yes, I'm representing Protect American River Canyons today. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have some individuals. I'll start with Diana Suarez and Cam Suarez.
Good morning. This is Diana Suarez representing Diana and Cam Suarez.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Suarez. David Sprunk and Sherry Sprunk.
Good morning. This is Sherry Sprunk representing David and Sherry Sprunk.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Sprunk. Bob Center.
Ms. Kenzie, Tracy Sheehan can represent Bob Center today.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sheehan. And Jeff Lighton, or is it Litton? Please correct me. All right, I have gone through my list, but we may have had others join us in the interim. Is there anyone else who is on the Zoom meeting and who intends to participate today who has not yet had a chance to introduce themselves?
Let's see here. My name is Jim Paschal. I was asked to sit in for Sierra Club about a day or two ago.
Thank you, Mr. Paschal. Is there anyone else?
David Zielinski, Sierra Club.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Zielinski. And Mr. Woodall, I couldn't tell if you were raising your hand, and I saw that you were on mute, so please go ahead and speak up.
Yes, hello. Apologies for signing in late. Tim Woodall on behalf of Protect American River Canyons.
Thank you, and no problem, Mr. Woodall. I hope the Zoom is working. Sometimes it takes me a few minutes to get on too. Is there anyone else? In the room? I'm
yes,
sorry,
Greg Jones and Doug Roderick are with Nevada Irrigation District as well.
Thank you. Good morning. Anyone else?
Yes, Ricky Heck, elected board member, Nevada Irrigation District.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Heck. Anyone else? I'm looking for hands, or go ahead and please feel free to speak up. It looks like we have two in the waiting room. If I can ask my team to let them in, I would appreciate it. I saw Mr. Rockwell, I saw you were able to join us. I don't think you have yet introduced yourself. Would you please introduce yourself at this time, if you can hear me?
Yes, Mark Rockwell. I'm the president of Northern California Council of Fly Fishers International. And I've been working. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rockwell. I'll give one last call. Is there anyone else in the room who has not had a chance to introduce themselves who plans on participating today? Well, thank you. Thank you for moving through that. I'd like to go ahead and get started with the substance of our conference today. I will note that I received a proposed schedule from Nevada Irrigation District in accordance with my direction in the status conference ruling of September 10th. And that is available and has been available on the AHO FTP site for this proceeding. I also received status conference statements from South Sutter Water District, as well as Foothills Water Network, which was filed on behalf of a number of participants who are listed in the status conference statement. But late yesterday, the AHO received a statement from Jeff Lighton. That is now available on the AHO FTP site. I understand Mr. Lighton is not online today, but I just will try to remind everyone that I appreciate having those status conference statements, particularly the written statements, by the deadline that I have set. It gives me a chance to read them. It also gives everyone else a chance to read them and be prepared for the status conference. So I really, it is very important to get those in on time, although I did receive that statement from Mr. Lighton, and it is available on the AHO FTP site for all of you to review. I read the status conference statements with the exception of Mr. Lighton's, so you don't need to repeat that information today unless there's something that you would like to emphasize, although I am going to ask some specific questions, so don't be too afraid to repeat yourself as we work through the schedule going forward in this proceeding. As I see it, the purpose of this status conference will be to discuss the procedural matters on how to move forward with respect to NID's pending petition for assignment and application, as well as South Sutter Water District's request for release from priority. I have the following agenda for this conference in my notes. I'd like to turn first to an update on the status of negotiations between South Sutter and Nevada Irrigation District about the South Sutter's request for releases from priority. I think we can talk about that first. Next, I would like to turn to a Nevada Irrigation District and a summary of your proposed schedule of actions, which you did file with the AHO. And I will also hear any objections or comments that other parties may have on that proposal, on the proposed schedule. And then finally, last, we'll turn to next steps and how we move forward from here after we've talked about the substantive issues. I shouldn't say substantive, but we talked a little more about where things stand in the process of negotiations. With that, I will jump in. I'm going to, as I mentioned, I'd like to start with the negotiations between South Sutter Water District and Nevada Irrigation District. So I think first I'll turn to either Mr. O'Brien or Mr. Cho. If you have any comments on the status of your discussions with NID about South Sutter's request for release from priority. Is there anything you'd like to add to your status conference statement?
Yes, Ms. Kinsey, just briefly, as you know from our status conference statement, we met with NID representatives back in November, and we've agreed to put in place what I would call a fairly aggressive schedule of meetings, probably meetings every 2 weeks, starting here in late January. I'm working with Mr. McClure's office on the scheduling process. So we are very serious about trying to reach closure on the issues that we have with NID. And as I stated in my statement, I think we're optimistic that we'll get there. I did also want to note, and this wasn't on our statement, but these discussions basically are the next phase in some discussions that occurred back in 2017. So fortunately, we're not starting at ground zero. And I think both sides have a really good understanding of the issues and potential solutions. So I think we asked for a period of time until September 1 to complete those discussions, but I'm actually optimistic that we may be able to complete this process much sooner than that. So I think that's it for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. I will turn to Mr. McClure. Is there anything you would like to add to this?
I don't. The parties are engaged. It's anticipating, good negotiations. There is, I think, consensus that we'll have a check-in in July, around the first part of July. We'll have a good idea of what progress has been made since then, and then with a stay in place until September of this year, that should give us enough time to determine whether we're going to settle or not. And then I would think before South Sutter was to request a release of that stay, the hearing officer would have further briefing on the question of when and if a hearing on South Sutter's petition should go forward. So I don't want to jump the gun. Let's get these negotiations done first, and then the substantive issue of if and when a hearing will happen, I think should be briefed if necessary.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. I think since I have you on, let's go ahead. We'll jump to number 2 on my list. And I do want to hear from other parties, but I think maybe it makes sense to talk about both issues together. I, of course, received your proposed schedule. I had a chance to review it. And just to be clear, this is the proposed schedule that I asked for from NID about setting interim deadlines, at least tentative interim deadlines, on actions that are necessary to move towards a hearing on the substance of the petition for assignment and water right application. Is there anything else, Mr. McClure, you'd like to add to your proposed schedule other than what you stated in your filing?
No, the dates speak for themselves. This is an iterative process. We're a public agency. Some of the dates are going to adjust as the public process unfolds. And I think about 6-month check-in conferences are appropriate, and we can continue that iterative process. But as you can see from our dates, we're committed to getting the things done that need to be done to move forward. If a month here or there in this long process, I think we just need some flexibility. But as I say, the dates right now speak for themselves.
I did have one question for you, Mr. McClure. We may have, I know we did talk about the plan a little bit, the plan for water process the last time we met, but I just wanted to, so for my understanding, since I'm not as familiar, would it be fair to say, I just wanted to make sure I understand, would it be fair to say that part of the plan for water process would be to determine whether NID would continue to pursue the petition for assignment and the water right application, is that one of the issues that would be, I know that it's a larger comprehensive process, but is that one of the issues that is on the table in this plan for water process?
The plan for water will inform that decision. I don't know that the plan for water is going to be determinative of a thumbs up or thumbs down, but it's going to determine what the district's need is, what its current resources are. And of course, that analysis is going to inform whether this project is part of the district's future or not. That's why we think it's important to get this done before moving forward with the water right hearing.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. That's helpful. I appreciate that. At this point, I'll look to either Mr. Cho or Mr. O'Brien. Is there anything on the proposed schedule that you would like to comment on?
Just to reiterate the comments in our statement briefly, that South Sutter would like to reserve the right to request a hearing on its request earlier than the schedule proposed by NID. I agree with Mr. McClure. We don't need to discuss the merits of that issue now, and probably before a decision is made on that, we would want to have the opportunity for further briefing. But I just want to note that for the record.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Ms. Sheehan, I'll turn to you because I read your status conference statement on behalf of Foothills Water Network and others, but I know you have an interest in some of these issues. Is there anything you would like to add at this time to your comments in the status conference statement?
Thank you, Ms. Kenzie. Chris Schutz is going to speak for the network for today.
Thank you. Mr. Schutz.
Good morning. I think there are several things that we'd like to highlight briefly. One is that the network still believes that, and the folks who are involved in them still believe that the best sequencing of South Sutter's hearing, if indeed it comes to that, would be when there's a hearing on the merits. We're concerned that NID not having made a decision about whether it's going to pursue its application and petition or not, trying to defend its position as a hypothetical against a position, if indeed they don't settle with South Sutter, would sort of put it in an odd position of defending something that it might not actually be wanting to move forward. And there's also an efficiency and resources issue for the network of potentially having to address two hearings instead of one. One of the things that we do look at and that we called out in our conference statement is the idea that we would like to move the water availability analysis up so it's more sequential with the EIR. Part of the sequencing as we see it with the EIR and protest resolution is that we've basically been told by NID that they want to have an EIR, a draft EIR out before they seriously engage on or are able to seriously engage on protest resolution. But protest resolution often heavily depends on analysis and differing views on water availability analysis. And it seems to us that the plan for water should inform the water availability analysis enough so that the NID should be able to complete that by the time it's, or shortly after it's completed its draft EIR. And finally, the overall timeline is of concern to the network. We'd like to see the EIR moved up somewhat. We've been looking at this for 10 years now, or close. And some of us, some folks who were involved at the beginning are no longer available and able to participate for varying reasons. And the there's a concern that there'd be enough institutional memory among us to be able to effectively participate in the hearing when it happens, if it does. And therefore, we'd like to see the overall timeline, particularly on the EIR, accelerated. We appreciate the fact that NID is engaging the public process on its plan for water, and we'd like to be sure that NID has sufficient time to do that well and do it thoroughly, engage with the public as appropriate. But once that's completed, we'd really like to see the EIR move forward more quickly. That, I think, summarizes our position.
Thank you, Mr. Schutz. And will you just clarify for me, I was pulling up your statement. I think was the request from the Foothills Water Network and others who you're speaking on behalf of to move up the deadline for the EIR. It was approximately, it was between 6 and 10 months, if I recall correctly. Does that seem about right?
That sounds about right. We'd like to see the FEIR come out maybe closer to a year prior to the date that NID is indicated.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And with the acceleration of the water availability analysis, the overall process might be ready for hearing as much as a year or maybe a little sooner.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schutz. I will go ahead and turn to the rest of the room. I'm not sure if we need to proceed in any particular order, but maybe I can just see by a show of either actual or virtual hands whether there are others who would like to speak or comment on the proposals that we have heard so far, both for deadlines for NID to complete some of these actions, as well as the proposal from South Sutter to allow some additional time for them to pursue negotiations and then consider when and the timing of scheduling a hearing on South Sutter's request for release from priority. So please go ahead and raise your hand. I'm not sure I can see everyone in the room, so I'm scanning. I don't see any hands, so if you are raising a hand, please go ahead and feel free to unmute and speak up if you would like to comment on anything we've discussed so far. Hearing none, and there'll be another chance before we close, I'm going to turn to next steps on this. We talked about this a little bit, but I'll look to Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Cho. I understand, as you mentioned, both in your status conference statement and then during this conference, I think your request is that we stay any further proceedings towards a hearing on South Sutter's request for release from priority until at least, until September 1st, with the possibility that negotiations may be concluded sooner. But also that we schedule our next status conference somewhere around July 1st, 2022 to check in on the status of NID's process. Is that an accurate summary of your position, or do you have anything to add to that?
Nope, that's an accurate summary. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Mr. McClure, I think I heard from you consensus that it would be appropriate to hold another status conference in 6 months. Is there anything you would like to add at this point about how we proceed going forward, at least just looking at the short term of when we reconvene?
I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Ms. Sheehan or Mr. Schutz, I just heard from you, but it sounded like I heard consensus on 6 months, but maybe do you have any comments on South Sutter's request that we allow them? I suppose, well, let me summarize what I think your comments may be, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. As I understand, it's the position of the water network and the others whom you represent that these hearings should be held concurrently together in one consolidated hearing, and therefore that it would be appropriate to allow South Sutter and NID some additional time to negotiate with respect to South Sutter's request for release from priority, and that possibly, you can tell me otherwise, you don't have any objection to this request for stay until September 1st.
No objection.
Okay.
and we believe a 6 month 6 months check-ins in this process is appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Schutz. Do any of the other parties, I will turn to all of you again. Does anyone else have any comments about this proposal? And I have to say, I need to go back and look at some of these issues and decide how we go forward. As I've mentioned before, I do understand that my task and instruction from the State Water Board members is to move these matters that are assigned to the AHO forward. That is my job. And that is why these issues have been assigned to me. But I do understand it appears we have a consensus, at least in the short term, of how to proceed forward. So I'm going to go back and consider these issues, but so I don't want to put this out as a commitment. I am going to issue a ruling probably within the next month on how we will go forward. But this is your chance if any other parties would like to comment on any of the issues we've discussed so far. Please feel free to unmute and speak up. With that, the last thing I would like to do since we're here is tentatively look at our July schedules. As I said, this is not a commitment, but I think we're all online here. And I at least want to know from you. I can say in my on my schedule, I am not quite sure. I will have some summer trips. I'm not exactly sure when they'll be scheduled, so I'm not quite sure about my July. But at this point, it appears to be open. But is there anyone else who would like to comment on hard conflicts during the month of July when you would be unavailable to participate in a status conference? Noting that there's some flexibility, I don't expect you to have your schedule entirely pinpointed 6 months in advance.
This is Andy McClure. I have hearings on July 1st, so that
Okay.
date is not available for me.
Thank you. That's helpful. Is there anyone else?
This is Austin Cho. I'll have another client's board meeting on the 20th in the morning.
Thank you. That's helpful. I think we had that. I will try to remember to schedule around South Sutter and NID's board meeting dates. Anyone else? Well, with that, I just want to thank you all for joining me today. I think it's helpful for us to convene like this. I know it takes a little bit of time, but I appreciate it. I think, as I mentioned, you can expect to see a ruling letter within the next month or so, which will lay out how we're going to proceed going forward. And with that, I thank you for your participation today, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.